Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about the Homeowners Association which declared my property public. I woke up to a stranger flipping burgers on my porch grill while a pack of kids chalked hopscotch on my front steps, and a woman in a sun hat lectured my goats about mindfulness. That's not the kind of sentence you think you'll ever write about your own house, but that's exactly what I saw through the screen door at 10:42 a.m. on a Saturday. People I'd never met turning my porch into a cookout and my yard into an art station, with two teenagers using my barn wall as a selfie backdrop. I stepped out barefoot, coffee in hand, and asked the man wearing oven mitts why he'd fired up my grill. He smiled and pointed at a laminated sign zip-tied to my gate, Community Green Public Access. Underneath it in small print, managed by the Homeowners Association. Here's the part where your eyes might do the thing mine did, where the muscles around your mouth try to decide if you're about to laugh or shout. Because none of that made sense. I don't live in an HOA. The subdivision next door sprouted up last year, all matching fences and mailbox clusters, a neat little grid of identical roofs with pastel paint names that sound like salon colors. I've got 20 acres and a beat-up farmhouse that I rebuilt board by board after a storm took the roof years ago. I keep goats, a dozen pasture hens, and hives that hum in June like a chorus. The only boards I answer to are the ones nailed into the frame of my hayloft. But this laminated poster declared otherwise. The gist boiled down. The HOA claims my house is a shared property, but when I refused to join, they declared my house, my property, my farm public property. They stated it on flyers, on social media posts, and with those signs. Big mistake because I called 911. Backing up a little helps. My name's Nathan. I bought the place in a bankruptcy auction 9 years ago, long before the subdivision. It was a mess. Windows busted, septic failed, the whole thing tangled with thorny vines. I was the guy who worked double shifts at the fabrication shop, then spent nights ripping out mouse nests and sanding floors. The county recorder's office knows my parcel number like a lullaby, because I was in there every few months pulling permits, filing receipts, making sure every improvement and easement was squared away. I grew up around ranchers and school teachers. If there's a theme to my life, it's that anything worth keeping is worth defending the boring way, with paperwork and persistence. Then the subdivision arrived. One of the developers came by during the surveying stage. He leaned on my fence and pitched the dream. We're building a vibrant community with walking paths and a little playground. It'll be good for your property value. I listened, nodded, and then showed him the pin stakes that mark my boundary line. The surveyor's flagging tape flapped on my side. That's my garden, I said. Right up to this creek. He assured me they'd redraw a tiny corner of their common area to avoid any confusion. Practically sang about it. For a while after that, I thought we understood each other. Once houses started popping up, letters began arriving. They were polite at first. An invitation for me to be a charter member of the HOA, with founders' dues discounted for the first year. I wrote back, in my neat all-caps print, not interested. The second letter emphasized community standards. The third letter included a copy of the subdivision's CC and Rs, with sections highlighted about paint colors and lawn heights. I called the number on the letter and told a woman named Sable that they'd mailed the wrong guy. She sounded surprised. "But your property is inside the community area," she said. "It's shown on the plan as shared open space." "That plan is wrong," I told her. "My parcel hasn't changed since I bought it. Check your plat against the county GIS. My fence is right where it belongs." The calls stopped for a bit, replaced by posts in the neighborhood group page I don't belong to, but get screenshots of anyway because my friend Jolie lives 2 streets in. She's the kind of person who always ends up on neighborhood committees because she can bake 3 pies while handling a spreadsheet, and she hates drama, but also refuses to be steamrolled. She sent me screen grabs of threads that mentioned my farm lot, as if it were a topic on a scavenger hunt. That's where I first saw Pamela Lynn's name. She chaired the HOA board and wrote like a person auditioning for a pep rally. Her post declared that the open green and the historic farmhouse, my place is ragged, but apparently time makes anything historic, were part of the shared amenities of our neighborhood. Jolie texted me, "They've got your house in their newsletter as the community house." I drove over to drop off eggs Jolie buys from me sometimes. She handed me a printout of the PDF. There I was, in a picture obviously taken from the main road, my porch, my mailbox with my last name, I won't write it here, blacked out by me after I realized you could zoom. The caption said, future site of our little free library and gathering spot. I thought it was odd, and I was irritated that someone had trespassed to get that angle, but I still figured it was a misunderstanding I could fix with a calm conversation and a fresh copy of my deed. The conversation happened a week later on my gravel driveway. 3 board members showed up in pastel polos. Pamela wore white sneakers and the tight smile of someone who hears no as a personal defect in the speaker. Garrick, a guy who looked like he vapes in secret and calls himself solutions-oriented, nodded along with everything she said. The third, a quieter man named Theo, kept glancing at the goats like he was taking mental notes of their escape routes. Pamela explained that their master plan had always included a community green, and, unfortunately, the developer's lawyer had neglected to complete some paperwork, which meant the green didn't technically transfer to the HOA at closing. She made it sound like a shipping delay. The proposed fix? You can join the HOA as a zero-fee member and allow us to designate your yard as the community green. We'll maintain it for you, and you'll be part of something special. I told them as gently as anyone can when the polite thing is absurd that I wasn't joining their HOA. My place isn't yours to designate. I'm not interested in sharing my yard with the entire subdivision. I've got livestock, liability, tools. It's my home. Pamela's smile faltered. We've already published materials indicating that area is for neighborhood use. People are excited. It would be awkward to reverse course. Awkward, I said, is cheaper than a lawsuit. Garrick leaned on the word community like it could hypnotize me. We're being collaborative here. You're asking permission to do whatever you want with my land, I said. That's not collaboration. They left annoyed. I immediately drove to the county recorder and pulled certified copies of my deed and the subdivision plat. The woman at the counter, who recognizes me because I bring donuts on busy days, slid the map to me and we stared at the lines together. The HOA's community green was drawn to the edge of my northern fence, but not over it. The creek was the boundary, plain as day. Happens more than you'd think, she said. People read the marketing brochure instead of the legal map. I made a packet. Copies of my deed, the plat, a highlighted county GIS printout with the boundary marked, a letter summarizing my view in simple words. I put it in a tight, clear sleeve and delivered it to the HOA's clubhouse mailbox. Then I went home and fixed a latch on the goat pen gate because no matter what anyone argues about paper lines, a goat can always find a loophole and sprint through it. For a month, things quieted. I saw a few people drive slowly past my driveway, eyes lingering like they were measuring curtains through my windows, but no more letters. Then came the Saturday cookout. The laminated signs appeared at dawn on the front gate and the back easement, matching fonts, matching zip ties. When I checked the fence line, I found the wire where the back gate lock snipped clean. Set up in my apple trees was a folding canopy with a table of store-bought cookies and a crock pot with a note, potluck label allergens. There were balloons tied to my fence posts and a chalk arrow on the county road pointing community green toward my driveway. I won't lie, my first reaction was disbelief so pure it felt like a magic trick. My second was to count people. I counted 9 adults and 11 kids. I spotted 2 dogs on retractable leashes tangling my tomato cages. Under the open barn door, a pair of teens took photos in front of stacked hay. I asked the guy at my grill to turn it off. He blinked at me. The email said it was community space. Pam said the farmhouse was part of our common area, is it not? That email was wrong, I said. And because people doubt when the answer contradicts what they want, I pointed at my house number, the large no trespassing sign, and the posted liability notice for livestock areas I'd put up for my own visitors. He lifted both mitts like a ref calling time out and said, "You should talk to Pam." He pronounced her name like a brand. I texted Jolie, "Are you seeing this?" And she wrote back, "I'm on my way." She's the kind of friend you want when reality goes sideways. She also has the kind of low, calm voice that can lower a room's temperature. While I waited, I searched for Pamela. I found her organizing a game of lawn bowling with a set of plastic pins she set on my walkway. I told her to clear my property immediately. She polite-voiced me. "Nathan, the board voted to open the green this weekend since you declined to be part of the HOA. The green isn't yours alone. It's a shared amenity. We're complying with our governing documents. You're welcome to attend, of course." That sentence jumped the tracks. "You can't vote to take my land," I said. "That's not how voting works. You can vote for matching mailboxes or pancake breakfasts. You can't vote to turn my front porch into a park. That's theft with decor." "We didn't take anything," she said. "We just recognized an existing resource. I pulled the sign off my gate. You put this up on my fence. Because we managed the space," she snapped. That was it. The conversation had become an infinite loop. I'd tried calm. I'd tried documentation. And now there were kids running around my livestock like it was a petting zoo, and a teenage boy standing with his back against my open barn door messing with the bolt. That was enough. I stepped off the porch, went inside, and called 911. I'm aware that at that moment some people will say, why involve law enforcement for what could be settled with neighbors and cookies? I have the kind of brain that narrates my decisions against imaginary comment sections. But here's why. Because there were 36 ways a person could get hurt right then, ranging from goat horn to nail protrusion to falling off the hay bales those kids were climbing. And I know who gets sued when people get injured on a public asset they've decided to invent. Also, because my gate had been cut and strangers were in my home area, and someone had openly told me she had the right to it. The dispatcher was steady. I explained there were people trespassing on my private property, and that the head of a neighboring HOA had declared my house a community green. The woman said, "We're sending someone now. Can you stay inside?" I said I'd stay on my porch because the only thing more dangerous than random kids near livestock is random kids near livestock without any adult supervision. And it turns out none of the parents knew that goats can get spooked by sudden motion. I stepped back outside and said loudly but evenly, "Everyone needs to leave my property. This is not public property. I will show any adult who asks the deed." Some folks looked embarrassed and started corralling their kids. Others looked at Pamela. She raised her chin. "We're protected under our declaration," she called. "We have rights to shared spaces. Nathan is confused about his lot lines." And that's when Jolie arrived like a weather front. She slid her car into the gravel, stepped out with her hair back in a bandana and said, "Hi neighbors, I'm Jolie. I live on Wren Court. This is privately owned land. I've seen the deed. I printed it for the book club when this came up in the chat. There's no easement. There's no dedication. The plat your board mailed us doesn't show any of this. If you remain after being asked to leave, you are trespassing under state law. Please don't put Nathan in a position where he has to file charges." Her voice carries just enough authority that it stopped the mess. A few parents started pulling down balloons. The grill guy turned off the flames and apologized. There was a murmur like a crowd leaving a game. Pamela didn't budge. "We're not trespassing," she told the group. "We have community rights." She took the folded map from her tote and waved it like a flag. "The creek is our border, and the green extends to the farmhouse. It's right here." "It's an old marketing flyer," Jolie said. "It's not the recorded plat." She reached out to take it. Pamela held it back like a toddler who doesn't want to share a toy. That's the image that met Deputy Sloan when he pulled in. Parents dispersing, a woman clinging to a brochure, and me barefoot on my porch, heart hammering behind my sternum. He got out slow, kept his hands visible, did the whole scanning thing you see on traffic stops. I've got respect for people who have to enter a scene where feelings are already tangled. "Morning," he said. "Who called?" I raised my hand. "Me, I'm Nathan. This is my place. I called because these folks opened my fence and came onto my property after I told their HOA I'm not part of it." Sloan looked at Pamela. "Ma'am?" She presented her case with the confidence of a person who hasn't heard the word no for a while. "Deputy, our board designated this area as a community green. The farmhouse was intended as a shared space. Nathan's property is in the middle of our neighborhood. Our declarations authorize the board to manage common areas, and that's what we're doing." Sloan listened without interrupting. Then he asked for the paperwork she cited. She gave him the flyer. He read it, then said, "This isn't a legal document." I handed him my packet, the deed, the plat, the GIS printout, my typed letter. He flipped efficiently through the pages, checked the parcel numbers against the deed, then looked at Pamela and said, in the neutral tone of a person reading a weather alert, "Ma'am, his property is not yours. Your HOA's declaration does not apply to land you do not own or have legal rights to. You can't designate someone else's house as a park." Pamela opened her mouth. Sloan rephrased it. "What you're doing here, entering after being told not to, opening a locked gate, is trespassing. If the property owner wants to press charges, he can. At minimum, you need to leave now. And if any property was damaged, we'll document it." Garrick whispered, "This is getting blown out of proportion." Jolie murmured, "It got proportionate when you cut the gate." Sloan radioed for another unit to take photos while he made us all breathe slower by existing. "Mr. Nathan, are you safe right now? Do you want to press charges?" I looked around. The crowd had thinned to the diehards. The balloon strings hung limp. A kid cried because his cookie was half dropped in the gravel, and his mom was telling him it was dirty now. My gate lock hung in two shiny halves. I thought about how many hours of my life it had taken to build this place into something that held heat and comfort. I thought about how absurd it was to be put in a position of looking like the unfriendly one for defending a boundary that was older than the subdivision itself. "Yes," I said, "I do." Sloan nodded. "We'll document the damage to the gate and the signs that were put up." "Who installed those?" He looked at Pamela. "The board," she said, arms crossed. "We manage the green." Sloan wrote something, looked at Garrick and Theo. "Who physically installed them?" Garrick blurted, "We did it together," then seemed to realize he'd just answered a question he didn't have to answer and added, "Voluntarily." The second deputy, Hart, arrived and took photos of the cut lock, the zip ties, the sign. He asked me to email the copies of my documents so the case report could include them. Pamela started to argue again, but Sloan held up a hand. Not unkind, just firm. "Ma'am, your remedy, if you think you have some right here, is to take it to civil court. But unless and until you have a court order or a recorded easement or a deed, you can't come back on this property without permission. And these folks clearly do not have permission." He turned to the remaining parents. "Folks, it's time to go." They went, not all gracefully. A few shot me looks like I'd canceled summer, but most had the decency to look sheepish. And then the yard went quiet but for the goats, who'd recognized paper plates as edible and had decided to audition for a composting role. Sloan gave me a case card with a number on it. He said he'd recommend misdemeanor charges for trespass and criminal mischief for the gate cut, and that the county prosecutor would review it. He told me how to apply for a no trespass order that would cover the people I could identify. He also said he'd swing by the HOA clubhouse and let them know the law was the law. "If they keep it up, call us," he said. "That's what we're here for." When the deputies left, Jolie and I sat on the porch steps. She brought out a tube of sunscreen and dabbed it on her nose like we were getting ready for a softball game. "You know this isn't the end," she said. "Not unkindly, just realistic." I nodded. "They're going to be mad." "They were mad before they even got here," she said. "It's easier to steamroll than to admit they misread a line on a map. People get attached to what they think they've been promised. It doesn't become less wrong just because it was printed on glossy paper." We spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning up. Balloons went into a bag. I reset the gate with a new lock. I took down the public access signs and tossed them into a pile by the barn, and then reconsidered and tucked them into the back of the shop. Evidence matters. I downloaded the photos from my porch cameras and printed stills of Garrick cutting the gate and Pamela zip-tying the sign. Jolie labeled them in neat Sharpie. I might have a debt of pie to repay. Sunday morning, there were two things on my front steps that weren't there when I went to bed. A note and a paper plate of cookies wrapped in plastic wrap. The note was printed and unsigned, but the kerning looked like Pamela had formatted it, and the sentences were exactly the kind you write when you think you're writing a legal letter because you once watched a courtroom drama. It instructed me to cease obstructing the community green, to return the signage to the board, and to prepare to attend a hearing. It gave a time and date. It also included a warning that if I didn't comply with HOA decisions, I'd face fines. Jolie read it out loud, then burst into a laugh that startled the rooster. "They don't get to fine you. You don't belong to them." "I know," I said, but the absurdity was tiring. It's one thing to deal with a person who got the wrong address. It's another to deal with a person who keeps forwarding the mail because they like your glossy catalog more than their own. I didn't attend the hearing. I emailed the HOA a short reply stating that all further communication should route through my attorney. I didn't have a lawyer yet, but I know how to write that sentence and mean it. Then I made 2 appointments, one with a property attorney that Monday morning and one with a therapist the next week, because yes, sometimes the right move is to recognize when your shoulders have climbed to your ears and your jaw is calcified from waking up ready to argue, and you need to talk it out before it turns into ulcers. The attorney, a woman named Rhea who wore boots with her suit and had a laugh like a badminton serve, quick and precise, read everything I landed on her desk. She underlined phrases and stuck tabs with little neon flags. "We're going to file for an injunction," she said. "We'll also look at a civil claim for trespass and slander of title. They've published false statements about your property, and it's caused you harm. You've got damages, the gate, the interruption of your business day, potential loss if they keep people on your land, the stress. We'll also file a police report supplement with your camera stills, and we'll put the HOA's insurance on notice." "Insurance?" I asked. She grinned the way people grin when they're about to explain a lever arm. "Yes, HOAs carry liability policies. If their board acts in a way that creates exposure and claims, the insurer looks very closely at whether they're operating within their governing documents. If they're using someone else's land as a park without permission, that's not a covered risk. At minimum, they'll get a stern letter. Maybe more." I asked the obvious question. "I don't want to spend a year of my life in court. Best outcomes happen when you're willing to go all the way but also willing to be boring," she said. "We'll be specific. We'll be polite. We'll be relentless, and we'll use the fact that you called 911 not as a threat but as a boundary marker. The law is on your side, and you took the right step to keep people safe." On my way out, she handed me a list. Right to farm statute in your state, livestock liability signage, drone trespass laws, recording acts. Keep everything documented. She told me to keep my porch camera and a spare battery handy. Bullies get tired when there's sunlight and a paper trail. The next week, my hive suffered a hit I didn't see coming. I walked the fence lines at dawn, and I noticed a scatter of dead bees at the base of the southern hive, more than the usual spring attrition. By noon, the ground looked peppered with tiny berries. I cracked the lid and found a lethargic cluster. The timing lined up perfectly with the HOA's new landscaping service, which had sprayed the subdivision's common planters the day before. The breeze had carried a mist over the boundary, settling on dandelions that my bees love. I collected samples, labeled jars, and made another call, this time not to 911, but to the state agriculture department. An investigator named Marta returned my voicemail within an hour. She told me to freeze the samples, save the dead bees, and give her the name of the company that did the spraying. I gave her what I knew and explained the dispute with the HOA, in case anyone later called it a coincidence. This is the part where plots start weaving together like twine, because while I was gathering bees in little zip-top bags, Rhea filed the injunction papers with the court, Sloan filed his incident report and forwarded it to the prosecutor, and Marta scheduled a site visit to take samples. Meanwhile, Pamela sent another email blast to the neighborhood claiming I'd weaponized the police and threatened families. Jolie sent me the screen grab. Below Pamela's note were comments from folks who'd come to the cookout, saying they felt misled and would not attend any more green days. That gave me hope. People can be misinformed and also capable of learning. Pamela, though, doubled down. She announced a trail day for the following weekend, a plan to open a walking path along the creek, which, as you might guess, runs along my fence. Rhea raised her eyebrows so high her bangs moved. "They're doing my job for me," she said. "The judge is going to love that they published their plan to trespass again after a police response." I spent that week doing 3 things I never thought I'd need to do simultaneously: ordering additional no trespassing signs and a trail camera for the back acreage, making pies for Jolie because friendship like hers deserves pastry, and reading up on agricultural tourism statutes because I was forming an idea, and ideas around here have a habit of growing legs if you feed them. Saturday came cold and bright. The creek shone like glass. I set up a chair by the back fence, camera ready, and brewed coffee in a thermos so tall it looked like a prop. A group of about 12 people from the HOA appeared at the end of their cul-de-sac like a bird-watching group. Only instead of binoculars, they held loppers and a spool of marking tape. They reached the fence, paused, and then Garrick, bold from bravado or boredom, slipped through a gap where the fence meets the old cattle gate. He put his foot on my side. I said, as even as I could, "Stop. You're crossing onto private property. The sheriff's office advised you not to do that." Garrick froze, then made the mistake that confirmed exactly who he is inside. He looked back at the group with a grin like he was on stage and said, "It's public." That's when Theo, the only one of the 3 board members with a conscience that day, put a hand on Garrick's elbow and said, "Don't." It wasn't loud, but it was enough to pull the rest of them back from the line. Pamela wasn't there, which turned out to be strategic because it gave her deniability. But there was a woman I hadn't seen before who took out her phone and recorded me like she was documenting a crime. "We're just walking," she said. "You can't block access to water." "Actually," I said, because details are my favorite kind of bat, "you can't cross my fence. Riparian rights don't mean my yard is a sidewalk. There's no public easement here. They stood there, a knot of people whose afternoon had gotten less fun. I took pictures. They took pictures of me taking pictures. It was a silly dance. And then a pickup I recognized rolled up. Deputy Hart. He nodded at me like we were neighbors spotting each other at the feed store. "Morning," he said to the group. "You're on the line of a private property. The judge is reviewing an injunction. Why don't we step back off the fence and let the court figure it out?" They went slower than they'd arrived. Hart lingered. "I ran the case number," he told me. "The prosecutor filed misdemeanor trespass charges on 2 individuals for last Saturday. We'll be serving papers Monday." He paused. "I know this is a headache, but I want you to know we see what's happening." Headache was a mild word. The type of stress that gets into the hinge of your jaw and the corner of your eyelid and makes your hand shake when you hold a nail steady. But hearing that the law was moving, slow, boring, steady, took the pressure in my chest down a notch. 2 days later, something arrived that cracked the whole thing open in a way I hadn't expected. A thick packet from the county planning department. Inside were emails obtained through a public records request RIA had filed. They included a thread between the developer and the HOA board from months back, where the developer admitted they'd used the phrase community green in early brochures before they'd finalized the plat, because, and I quote, "it sounds better than detention basin." The green was never a park. It was the stormwater area that collected runoff before it flowed to the creek. The developer wrote, "We can't include the farmhouse parcel. It's not ours." Pamela replied, "We'll message it as shared anyway and deal with the holdout." Deal with the holdout. My ribs went tight like a belt. Ria skimmed the printouts and whistled. "You don't usually get this kind of bow on a box," she said. "This supports slander of title and intentional interference. It also looks bad to a judge." They knew. They did it anyway. Marta from the agriculture department showed up in work pants, labeling vials and checking wind readings like she'd done it 1,000 times. "The lab will tell us concentrations," she said. "If a restricted use pesticide drifted from their landscaper onto your forage, there are fines." She left a bee kill pamphlet, a checklist, and a reminder that even when you do everything right, time moves slow. I thanked her and added waiting to the list of chores that come with defending a home. I don't wait well, so I filed for an agritourism permit and scheduled an open farm Saturday. If the HOA insisted my place was public, I'd show them what responsible public actually looks like, managed by the owner with the law in plain sight. I invited people who know how to be on a farm, homeschool co-ops, 4-H families, a church volunteer group. A sign at the gate set the rules. No wandering, closed-toe shoes, supervised animals parking only on the legal shoulder with cones. I hired 2 off-duty deputies and printed flyers that said in bold, "Hosted by Nathan on his privately owned farm, not affiliated with any neighborhood association." Cars lined the road like a careful parade. Kids made goat milk soap. Parents peppered me with hive questions. I laid out restoration photos and a 1-page primer on reading a plat. We roped off the barn interior. Several HOA families came, wary at first, then relieved. They saw I wasn't anti-community. I was anti-theft disguised as a potluck. Someone, later we learned it was Garrick, called the management company to complain I'd packed the roads. The deputies waved traffic along. Code enforcement measured the shoulder, checked my permit and cones, and left. Petty met lawful and came up short. At sundown, with goats chewing hay and kids carrying soap bars to their cars, the place finally felt like itself again. Sometimes the sharpest revenge is to show the truth without raising your voice. I skipped the next board meeting, but my neighbor Jolie texted blow-by-blows. Why had the board represented my property as theirs? Someone read the developer's email aloud. Theo, the one director who'd warned against the community green story, said the creek line was clear on the plat and my parcel was never theirs. Pamela tried to gavel order with a wooden spoon. A shaky video later showed "Deal with the holdout" on the projector like the title of a bad film. The next morning, my mailbox coughed up a stack of violation notices addressed to me, with fines for obstructing the community green. Ria, my attorney, sent a letter citing a state law against deceptive association practices and copied Consumer Protection and the Attorney General. She attached the 911 report number, photos of their signs, and the developer email. Her closer was a postcard of accountability. Any further attempt to collect a non-existent debt would be used as evidence of willful violation. Deputy Sloan arrived with no trespass orders a judge had signed for Pamela and Garrick, plus citations for the cut gate. He served them in view of neighbors. By dinner, the HOA's email tone had turned beige. Ongoing legal matter, and we encourage civil dialogue. At the injunction hearing, the judge, glasses perched like birds, asked the HOA's lawyer if his client had any recorded interest in my land. No, he admitted. Injunction granted with a warning that further trespass would be contempt. Outside the courtroom, their attorney asked about settlement. Rhea said, "Send a proposal and stop contacting my client directly." Marta texted preliminary lab results, restricted pesticide residues in pollen sampled just beyond the subdivision planters. Administrative penalties were coming. Driving home, I found a tiny stake in my ditch labeled Community Green. I pulled it like a splinter and kept walking. Meanwhile, neighbors started a recall. Kendra canvassed, Milton posted about safety. Suri apologized for believing glossy flyers. The petition met every technical requirement. At the special meeting, Theo read a timeline of ignored warnings. "We were wrong," he said. The vote removed Pamela and Garrick and seated an interim board, Kendra, Milton, and Theo, tasked with fixing the mess. The HOA's insurer then sent a reservation of rights letter listing trespass, defamation, and slander of title as acts they might not cover, and demanded every newsletter and email. Corporate gravity had entered the chat. We met the interim board in a fluorescent room. These folks came to solve, not perform. Rhea's list was clear. Record an affidavit of non-interest in my parcel. Publish a retraction everywhere the false claim had spread. Pay restitution for the cut gate, bee losses, and a portion of fees. Fund a native buffer along the creek and adopt a permanent no-spray policy. Sponsor bee-safe gardening classes. Honor the no trespass orders and route all communications through council. Done, Theo said. We signed a framework and let the paperwork grind. The court entered the injunction formally. Pamela pled to trespass and paid restitution as part of a deferred judgment. Garrick did the same and drew 40 hours of roadside cleanup. The insurer renewed with conditions, including mandatory board training and lawyer review for any message about property rights. The HOA recorded the affidavit. The retraction landed on every kitchen counter. The farmhouse is private, not a common area. Earlier statements were false. Crews planted willow, dogwood, milkweed, and coneflower along their side of the creek. Bees found them by July. I filed a notice of non-association, dry words that save arguments later. A neighbor left a small wooden box with a note. "Would you accept a little library? No pressure." I stained it and set it just inside the fence facing the road with a sign that reads, "Private property. Borrow from the roadside." Kids traded paperbacks and left drawings of crowned goats. Life softened. The hens laid, the hive steadied, the mailbox returned to boring. The sheriff's office asked me to join a talk called Boundaries and Better Barbecues. We covered plats, permits, and the correct use of public. No goats attended. If you're looking for the revenge, it lives where rules live. The 911 call, the deed and plat in a folder, the court order with teeth, the insurer's letter, the apology mailed at scale. It also lives in a creek bank that hums at dusk. The punishment wasn't theatrical, it was gravity. Fines, service hours, a resignation, a price-reduced listing, a retraction, and a file at the county with dates in ink. Big mistake because I called 911. That call didn't finish it, but it began the ending and made room for a small box of books, a handful of milkweed seeds, and a gate that stays latched. Friends, thank you. See you soon.